My guest today is a leader who's been at the helm of one of the world's largest industrial companies, navigating it through unprecedented global challenges, from technological disruptions to sustainability imperatives. Under his leadership, the company has not only doubled its market value, but has also positioned itself as a pioneer in integrating social and environmental responsibility deeply into its core strategy. He's been recognized globally for his visionary approach to transforming traditional business models, emphasizing innovation, inclusivity, resilience, while fostering a corporate culture that values people and planet equally. His career journey is an inspiring story of adaptability, commitment to positive impact, and long term leadership in a complex and evolving global landscape. It's a real honor and a personal pleasure knowing him for many years to welcome today the chairman and former CEO of Schneider Electric, Jean-Pascal Tricoire, to the Positive Leadership Podcast. A very warm welcome, Jean-Pascal. Très heureux de t'avoir sur le podcast.
Thank you very much, Jean-Philippe, for having me today. And it's great, as always, to be with you.
Thank you, Jean-Pascal. I'd like to start where I usually start with my guest, with your early background. And of course, for all of us, it starts where we were born. I think you grew up in western of France in a farming family, and that's a long way from the global boardrooms that frequent, obviously. So could you tell us more a bit about your early life? How did you grow up exactly? And what aspects of your upbringing shaped your views on your leadership, your accessibility, and maybe even innovation starting early in the farms?
Look, that's a question which people don't ask me normally. But yeah, I was born in a small village of France, remote place, 3,000 people in a very rural community. To give you a sense of that first part of my life, I took my first train when I was 14 and didn't take many on my first plane when I was 23. So while I would
Wow. Did you
characterize
bike
the rest,
before that?
yeah,
Were you biking before that using a bike or?
yeah, no, but we had cars and we had mopeds and bikes, actually. But what
Yes.
it tells you is that the first 20 years of my life, were
Hmm.
deep into a very a cohesive community where everybody knows each other and where everybody, whatever the social level, is connected, and where I had to pay my studies on to participate to the living of the family, to do a lot of works,
Hmm.
to go on to keep going. What I've learned from that time is certainly, I think, to be grounded in reality, and it's good to have
Hmm.
ideas, but it's even better when you can drive it into action. Certainly, a very deep sense of teamwork, on working in communities, on integrating all the impacts of what you do in the communities around you, and probably even more important, an insatiable appetite to discover the world. Because when you've been
Hmm.
in the same environment somewhere, even if you've done tons of things, you've led associations, you've done tons of
Yeah.
different works, you've participated in multiple events, you are part of a generation where everybody knows each other, and you've done so many things together. My appetite was really to do something different and to go for the world,
Hmm.
which I've done in the next phase of my life, where I've probably one of the most traveled persons. I've been to more than 100 countries and developed the
Yeah.
internationalization of Schneider. But never lose in sight
So,
that everything you
yeah.
do has a profound impact on
Hmm.
communities.
Yeah. Just double clicking a little bit on that, Jean Pascal, if you don't mind. Can you tell us more maybe about the influence and, of course, the shaping of your values by your parents, your family? And was that life part of more of a kind of a farming community around yourself? Tell us more about the environment in which you started to grow as a kid and then, of course, as an adolescent.
Look, those were, I remember all those times are very happy. We were a very united family. And when you speak about families in rural France of that time, those were numerous families, number of people, right?
Mm.
Cousins, like you can't count them, on a very well, a lot of friendship beyond family ties on with your family and with all the friends in the village. So number
Yeah.
one, very happy. Number two, what you do is always collective. Um, there is nobody
Mm.
sticking too much its neck out. It's about succeeding together, dealing with things together, making the village on the community progress. When there is more work on one side, everybody sorts of rallies there and helps somebody to do it. And then everybody goes back to the next task. Those were humble times.
Mm.
While we were all very happy, we didn't have much money, and that means that
Mhm.
you know how to live on a shoestring, and money is really important. You know the value of money, really, and I
Yeah.
think I've kept that for the rest of my life. And
Mhm.
I think what I kept from that time certainly is the fact that everything we do should be related to the impact it does to the real life of people.
Mm.
I've been even in the later part of my life where I was leading the company more passionate about the micro, the way decisions we
Yeah.
make will impact the motivation on the way people behave
Mhm.
than by the macro on the big figures. I have to
Mm.
say, we developed Schneider tremendously in new economies in emerging countries, which by definition are
Yeah.
starting from the rural stage. And I always felt very connected wherever I was living in those new economies, would it be in Africa or at the beginning of
Of course.
our operations in China, because the people I was meeting had the same history as me. They were coming from the rural,
Yes.
from the countryside, and then they had emigrated to cities, and then they were starting new business, and then they were developing and discovering the world. So it was easy to feel connected. And still, as of today, I
Yes.
still often go
Mhm.
to the countryside to see what's happening on to reconnect to those origins.
Any leading example coming from your dad or your mom, or in terms of your childhood again, which influenced you deeply?
Certainly, but I wouldn't be specific. This is shaping you all the time. But I think my these origins connected me a lot to nature. Not
Mm.
only because we are living on the countryside and you are truly working on in the nature, but also we had created with friends, or we are developing a sports club. My passion was whitewater kayaking,
Mhm.
which in the west of France can be a
Aha.
very cold and very demanding sport.
Yeah.
And I spend by passion my free time in sort of small expeditions in rivers, which by definition are
Mm.
very isolated from the world, and where you see um, all the richness, but also the fragility of ecosystems between the water, between nature, on the connection it
Mm.
has with the development of society. And that has remained a really powerful driver of everything I would do, is making sure that as we develop new technologies, new solutions, we would also make sure that they would participate to the preservation or the regeneration
Mm.
of nature. Would it be because I
Mm.
was living there and I still go there by taste, right? Because I like
Yeah.
to dive back again in that environment. And also because when you do kayaking, you spend 2 days in the middle of nature, really remote from, and you understand how fragile and how beautiful and how precious this environment is.
environment is, yeah. Talking about a rural environment, Jean-Pascal, in a recent conversation I had on a podcast, which will go live very soon with Nicolas Chaban, don't know if you know Nicolas Chaban, the founder of C'est qui le patron. We spoke about the urgent need to ensure a fair income for farmers and the broader agriculture crisis that is unfolding all across Europe and probably across the world as well. Given your bringing again in this rural environment, I'm curious how sensitive you are of those issues today, not just in France but globally, because you're obviously a global citizen. And how much they've shaped your worldview, especially in terms again of sustainability and inclusive growth, starting with the people who feed us, the farmers.
Hey, look, being a farmer is probably one of the toughest jobs, but also certainly the most useful job on earth. But it's really tough. If you are in France, for instance, you're going to be facing, or in Europe at large, you're going to be facing a mountain of regulations, a growing amount of
Mm.
regulation, at least an avalanche at times. You're going to be facing consumers who want the lowest prices on whatever they say. They are ready to buy your competition, which is coming from the other side of the world on maybe not exactly the same standards. Um, and at the same time, you're going to be face purchasing power of very large retail chains. And at the same
Mm.
time, you are still doing probably the most important thing in any country, which is to feed the country. Uh,
Yeah.
I look at my friends who are farmers, right? And they are incredible
Mm.
innovators and entrepreneurs. Um,
Mm.
Forget the image of people who are just doing the things like in the old times and they are very conservative.
Yeah.
Conservative. They are truly knowledgeable of what they do. They use IoT. They've
Mm.
embraced, in my region, renewable energy. They've covered their roofs on
Mm.
solar panels. Last week, I was
Yes.
actually with some of them who have invested in windmills to power their
Mm.
installations and to decarbonize what they are doing. They are
Yeah.
trying to combine nature friendly or more natural ways of doing, and at the same time being productive. So it's on one side an incredibly interesting sector in terms of
Mm.
innovation and experimentation. It's an incredibly entrepreneurial sector because those
Yeah.
people, those those trades, they are truly
Mm.
entrepreneurs and very often at the scale of the family because they work together on the farm. And at the same time, I don't think they get the right recognition for what they are doing. Now, where
Mm.
I'm more optimist, I think all of us have realized that quality of food is really important, that we've really done crazy things in the past decades at this level. And there is a comeback to this, um, to that very important know how, which is about farming. I see also with a
Yeah.
certain interest people going from cities and going back to the
Mm.
countryside and trying to start being a farmer. Look, I know what it
Mm.
is. I think it takes a lot of knowledge and a lot of
It's
resilience to do
tough.
it, but
Very
more so a
tough.
lot
Yeah.
of knowledge. So we
Mm.
need to find a way, well, to attract more people to stay in the rural environment and to take care of nature, and more so to feed us with good
Yes.
things, right? Because at the end of the
Yeah.
it's the most important thing we do in life is to get well fed.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing
On
some of
maybe
your
Jean-Philippe, if I
obvious.
expand on if I'm just coming back from India, and in India,
Mm.
Schneider has an incredible presence that we have developed over the past
Yeah.
20 years. On one of the interesting things, India having those huge challenge of development, that huge opportunity of development, this is
Mm.
a place where we've developed a complete set of know-hows in solar farming, using
Mm.
solar energy to irrigate, to take care of the whole farms. And we are present in hundreds of cities in India where we work with local entrepreneurs who work with the farmers to help them
Mm.
change completely the productivity and the quality of what they are doing. So that is
Mm.
also something carrying in a
Yes.
different form
Yes.
in emerging countries.
Yeah, I think we'll come back to that later, Jean-Pascal, given again your incredible global views of the world and the way and the crucial role of energy in sustaining economy. I mean, from the lowest income countries in the world to the richest countries in the world. We'll get back to that. Now, I'd like to come back again to your roots. At one point, you studied electronic engineering at ESEO in Angers and later completed an MBA, I think, at EM Lyon Business School. And you've said that your MBA was a revolution in your life. So, what was this revolution about? Why, what this shifted for you during those years? What happened with that MBA?
Look, going to an electronic school was for me transitioning from the primary sector to the world of technology. And nobody really in my
Hmm.
family had done any technology, so it was really the discovery, and that seems like Jurassic. It was the arrival of the first microprocessors. When I say I've been um, um, an electronics engineer and they were not yet PCs, that seems like really,
Yeah,
really, really old, right?
really old.
We've kept learning over that. But going through 1 year at the business school was a true revolution because it was about business, right? And as
Hmm.
my environment before was not that. So well, I still have a very marked accent also in my way of speaking English.
We all do.
That's my carrying the French flag around the world. But this is also a time where I started to learn really English and to open
Hmm.
to the rest of the world. So a real learning about marketing,
Hmm.
branding, learning about finance, of course, which I felt um, more comfortable with because somewhere finance is the engineering side of business. That
Hmm.
it's a rational part of business.
Yes.
But
Mhm.
but really, I was fascinated by discovery of other companies on really all the aspect of how you. And I came out of this training saying that
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it was really important for me to choose a path where I would have an impact. I would do something
Yep.
that would try to solve a big problem, which I felt connected to.
Mhm.
Number two, that it was important that I would make what I would do relevant, that people
Hmm.
would understand, I would understand what I was standing for, people would understand what my company was standing for, and people
Hmm.
would come to work for the company because there was a true identified and unique reason to do it. So that
Yeah.
imperative of being relevant and being differentiated really stuck with me all over my career. And then again, really a
Yeah.
big appetite to discover the world because at that time I've still not taken my first flight. You spoke about my route,
Okay.
Jean-Philippe. There is one thing I
Mhm.
didn't say. I come from very, very special part of France, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Tell us more about
which
that.
is
Yeah. Which part of
which is
France?
called La Vendée, and
Yes. Oh, yeah.
and and
A lot of
and
history.
that is probably the last region in France
Hmm.
that had a sort of massacre. 20% of the
Yes.
population got killed during the
Killed.
last
Yeah.
civil war. I would say that happened
Hmm.
in France. And that really
Yes.
impacted a lot my way of thinking. On
Hmm.
one side, of course, I'm very French, and my ancestors all went to participate into the wars. And thanks God, we don't have any since
Hmm.
I was born. But at the
Yeah.
same time, we learn from that time that people should be very different of ideologies on things
Hmm.
that oppose people to people based on just ideas.
Ideas.
On the
Yeah.
second point, also the core marker of my region, because we had 20% of our people, and that was still in the memory of my family, where this happened
Yes.
also by the
Hmm.
government somewhere. Is that on one side, of
Hmm.
course, you have to be a patriot, but on the other side, you don't have to depend on the government, which is not very French. So if you look
No, it's
at
not.
this part of France, you have no job.
Yes.
People the jobless rate
Mm.
is very low. You have a lot of
Mm.
entrepreneurs, a lot of companies that are
Yeah.
created because we've learned in a rather recent history that was 200 years ago, so
Yeah.
recent enough that people would remember that on one side we
Mm.
want to belong, but on this other side we need to rely on ourselves to deal with our life. And that has also been a profound cultural foundation for what I've done
Mm.
in my professional life. Make sure
I'm
that you
sure.
rely on yourself and make sure that
Yes.
you, with your community, work on your future and don't beg for help on those kind of things.
No, thanks for opening up on this very important composition of your roots, Jean-Pascal, because again, for many of our international listeners from all across the world, the history of Vendée is very special. So please check it out if you don't know it yet, because it's very unique in the existence of France itself. But I'd like to keep going, Jean-Pascal, and talk a little bit about the formative career you had before joining Schneider Electric. And I think that helped you shaping your understanding of industry and leadership. You had experiences at Alcatel, Saint-Gobain, Schlumberger as well. So your path went from telcos to industrial companies and fossil energy companies. Could you tell us a little bit more about your early career before Schneider? What roles in particular, which experiences in those different industries really help you prepare for the challenges that you would face later in leading such a large global company?
Look, very simply, I didn't know what I would like to do, right? And I had
Mm.
nobody in my direct surrounding who could tell me what what I would,
Where to
what I
go?
could do, where to go. I mean, nobody
Yeah.
had been international. Nobody had been working in tech. Nobody had been really
Mm.
in business. So I tried with several missions. So some of them were internships where I sort of tested some of the companies. One of them was
Hmm.
a junior enterprise mission, which was going for Saint-Gobain for the first time. That was my first flight. Uh,
Flight.
Taiwan and Korea to make a market study
Wow.
with zero money. So that was really interesting. Um, so there you really appreciate to have been brought up in humble conditions because you can really live
Yes.
on $1 a day and still go to see customers during the day.
Yeah.
So anyway, those were the testing periods, and I was really looking for a company that would offer the right environment um,
Mm.
in and then give me an opening to international career and then be linked to something I would relate to. And this is where 1 year, just at the end of my MBA, after having done
Yeah.
those tests, I entered a French company called Merlin Gerin, which was
Mm.
based actually in the Alps, which connected very well with
Yes.
my passion for kayaking.
Mm.
As I like outdoor, I wanted to learn skiing, which I started at that time. So it was a personal part
Yeah.
of my life.
Mm.
But more so, it was one of those mid-sized companies that was really trying hard to go international. And
Mm.
in a sector which I thought was important for the future, which is energy.
Yeah. So this is where you got the interest, the excitement about energy early on, I
Yeah,
guess, by
yeah. Well,
getting
look,
into
I
the.
mean, this developed as we were
Yes.
going, but it was a time where energy was starting to integrate electronics,
Mm.
and they were looking to do. They were looking for somebody who would dare to do the first joint venture done
Mm.
by the company. So I
Interesting.
embarked in a first job that nobody really wanted, which was to work with a German competitor, company called Normola
Yes.
at that time, to develop a line of products that would compete with our biggest French competitor at that time, was
Yes.
called Télémécanique.
Well, yeah, I think this is what you just brought up, Jean-Pascal. I think is like a theme we'll come back to, which is you kind of always jump into jobs that nobody else wanted to take, right? We'll come back to that later on,
Yeah,
and that's probably explains why you ended up being a leader taking on bolder risk and challenges, because you never hesitated to raise your hand to go for jobs that, well, very few people wanted to do.
It's, yeah, look, maybe at the beginning I did it by necessity because you have to take the jobs that nobody wanted. But it should be more by taste because I'm always struck that when people ask for a job, they normally ask by how much turnover and how many people. And these are really
Yeah,
mainstream jobs, which by definition are more about managing than creating. But I've always been
right.
attracted by jobs which would be new sectors, zero
Hmm.
turnover, zero people, and that you have to develop
Hmm.
because then you can really build something anew and
Yes,
build it.
from scratch.
And then you're going to succeed, fail, but at least you've
Hmm.
done something where
You
you've
tried.
learned much faster and you've tried.
Yep, absolutely. Let's come back again to the early chapter again of your career, moving across industries, culture, and business context, which must have been incredibly formative. But imagine as well, it was not always easy to find your place, given again the way you grew up that you share with us, your roots, adjusting your personal style in particular to belong to the corporate world, especially in large traditionalization, I know can be a real challenge. I've seen that with sometimes new hires and even myself in the early days of my professional life as well. And particularly when you are driven by a strong sense of purpose and change. So, did you ever feel out of step with the dominant corporate culture at the time? And were there key mentors, managers, or people in those early days and companies who influenced your leadership philosophy, Jean-Pascal, and gave you the confidence to stay true to your values while still adapting again to this corporate system?
Well, the good, yeah, I think the good news that the company has evolved so much from that time, right? We've
Mm,
moved it so much. But uh, look, I really reason to what you said. When I came to the corporate world, coming from my origins, I was still largely that guy from that village, right? And I want to
yeah,
remain that guy, actually. And I will always, you can take the boy outside the village, but you can't take the village outside of the boy, right? It just
love
that's
it.
that's.
Yeah,
But at on the other hand, I thought it always helped me to bring something different, on a different look at things. Probably
mm,
more provocative, probably more detached, probably less compliant. When I say compliant, in terms of compliance with the mainstream, of course, compliance with
yes,
ethics. I think rural origins are a good education to strict
yes,
compliance to ethics. But
integrity. Yeah,
it gave me that sort of capacity to look at things in a different manner and look at it also from the impact it bring to, I call that real people. I call them real people,
mm,
real life,
mm,
family lives on the
yeah,
ground for many, and to stay connected and grounded to reality. But this learning of the corporate world was like for any of us, really um, big shock, a
yeah,
huge discovery from starting to travel, having some international meetings. We were doing R&D with a German company, starting to learn different cultures. And
mm,
I remember it as a great moment of my life. For me, it was like starting a new phase after those 20 years of specialization
yeah,
in that rural village life is going into that new phase. So, and I always found that one of the ways was really to deeply connect with the people I was working with
mm,
inside and outside the company. On humor is a good way to deal with differences, right?
mm.
On bringing a
Good
different,
sense of
yeah,
humor.
good
Yes.
sense of humor. The other thing
Mm,
is do, taking almost systematically jobs that people didn't want gave me a lot of freedom, so that
mm,
you could experiment things or put into
yeah,
place models, organization, teams which were not existing anywhere else, and prove that it
mm,
could work and actually prove work better and faster.
Yeah.
than what was in the mainstream, and that was a choice, right? Not to be sort
Yes.
of prisoner or sort
Mm.
of formatted by the mainstream, but try to experiment new things on the sidelines.
And any particular mentors or people who had a profound impact at that stage, again, before joining Schneider Electric at the time, who advised you on how to better fit to this corporate world, coming from the village and so on and so
No,
forth?
not really. I remember it
Not really. Okay.
as a pretty lone discovery,
Hmm.
uh,
Okay.
but
By yourself.
a happy discovery, right? I've been lucky.
Yeah.
I should start every part of what you're asking me to describe like luck to be able to go into that new phase, luck to meet a number
Hmm.
of. But at that time, it was pretty much discovering by yourself what was
Yeah.
possible.
So now it's time for Jean-Pascal, of course, to move to the company that will become your professional home for nearly 4 decades, I think.
Yeah,
Right? Almost 40 years. I did my 40 years with Microsoft, so I know what it means.
yeah.
So happy anniversary when it comes. But it's a wonderful, wonderful again. Corporate life you keep having, obviously. So before we dive into your journey with Schneider Electric, I think it's worth pausing for a moment on the company's incredible history. So I'll say a few words about that. I'll ask you a couple of questions. Schneider Electric, as many of you may not know across the world, is more than 2 centuries old. A legacy company that has constantly reinvented itself while remaining grounded in strong industrial roots. It reminds me actually of a discussion I had in a previous episode with Florent Mengo. I know that you know him well, a CEO of Michelin, another global French-based company with an extraordinary long-term story. We spoke about how Michelin has navigated global shift for over 130 years while staying true to its founding values, quality, innovation, care for people. And that kind of resilience, adaptation doesn't happen by accident. It's a result of deliberate cultural choices that pass from one generation of leaders to the other ones. Schneider Electric shares a similar DNA, I think, in some ways. Of course, companies are different as well. Originally founded in the 19th century in the iron and steel industry, the company pivoted into electricity, energy management, automation, becoming a global leader in sustainable transformation. So, can you tell us more about this incredible young lady of 200 years old, about the early roots of Schneider Electric? Who were the founders? What were the values they set at the beginning? And among those founding principles, which ones do you think still remain active and true today in the culture you've helped shaping, of course, for so many years, Jean-Pascal?
So actually, the company has not reached its bar of 200 years. It's
Not yet. Okay.
almost 190. So it was founded in
Pretty good.
1836 by a family called Schneider from the east of France. And as you said, and I won't go into the detail of everything, the company has been
Yeah.
extremely successful along its history, riding the different waves of industrial revolution, starting in iron and steel, going into steam engines, then complementing with electrical, starting really the wave,
Mm.
riding the wave of electricity. And then at the end of the 70s, the company had burgeoned into too many branches. It was a very
Yeah.
diversified and not consistent conglomerate. And this is a time
Mm.
when the family faded from
Okay.
the ownership and from the leadership
Ownership.
of the company. And at that time,
Yeah.
those were troubled times, if you remember, in France.
Yeah.
The beginning of the 80s. So a new management under the direction of Didier Pinot-Valenciennes took the leadership of the company
Yeah.
and decided to do something that was very new in France, which was to take a huge widespread conglomerate, which was going from a bit of iron and steel, telecommunications, you had
Mm.
ski clothes, you had ski resorts, you had rum factories and everything,
Oh.
and decided to refocus on a core. And within the whole conglomerate, he found a few companies that were doing electrical products on
Mm.
electrical systems. So somewhere sold all the other parts to other companies. And actually, those parts of Schneider became the foundation of very well-known other companies like Framatome or some
Yes.
finish with Alcatel or some finish with other
Mm.
branches. But that was the beginning of what would become Schneider Electric, which is
Yes.
almost a complete new phase in the company. Very often, companies struggle to reinvent themselves, or where they
Oh yeah.
reinvent, they change
Mm.
name. I decided on this, I would take the responsibility for that, is to keep the name of
The
Schneider
name.
and to keep going under the name of Schneider while acknowledging that it had very little in common with its
Yes.
history of the previous 150 years.
Mm.
So you could say
Mm.
that Schneider Electric, as we know it, was born under the leadership of Didier Pinot-Valenciennes for that refocus.
Yeah.
We then bought
Yeah.
another company called Télémécanique,
Mm.
which to
Mm.
complement the portfolio. We then bought in 91 a company called Squared in the US, which gave us a
Mm.
transatlantic presence. And then the next CEO, Henry Lackman, opened the company in terms
Yes.
of culture, in terms of internationalization. And then 5 years after, I was, well, given the privilege somewhere to be
To.
lended the keys of the company for the following 20 years and start a transformation that would be based on technology, on geography. But
Yeah. Hold on. Yeah. If you don't mind,
long,
if you.
long history.
Yeah.
But in fact,
Yeah.
you look at the essence of what we are today, an
Mm.
history which is more related to the past 40 years.
I see. Any remaining, I would say, of the values, of the foundational values of the company, would you elevate some of those values that exist for 190 years now in Schneider?
I think they have moved over time. Jean-Philippe. I would say on it's interesting because I speak about Schneider, but I entered in Schneider through Merlin Gerin, which was
Oh,
a
okay. Yeah.
company of engineers, uh,
Mm.
which had itself 80 years of history when I entered,
Mm.
which was a completely different culture. So I would say
Yeah.
what became the culture that we have today at Schneider Electric
Mm.
is much more the byproduct of companies that were acquired by the company to refocus on electricity. Take a company
Yeah.
like
Gotcha.
Merlin Gerin, take a company like Télémécanique, take a company like Squared in the US, and then later
Mm.
APC for the data centers, sector that
Mm.
you and me know very well,
Mhm.
which that is where the culture of Schneider Electric
Yes.
is originating from. And it's a deeply technological and international culture in terms of spirit
Mm.
and entrepreneurial
Mm.
culture. It's more the culture of
Yeah.
companies which at the origin were small companies of 1 to 2 billion and merging together formed what I inherited, which is a company of
Mm.
8 billion turnover, which was done by the merger of those. And then today is a
Yes.
company of 30, $40 billion of turnover.
Yeah. What a change. We'll come back to that. Let's come back to the very early days, I think, when you joined Schneider Electric back in 1986. And over the years, you held roles across development, marketing, general management, including international assignments in Italy, in China, South Africa. Can you take us back to the beginning of your journey at Schneider Electric? And what was it like arriving there? What was your first role? And how did you perceive the corporate culture at the time, again, landing there?
Look, it's back in time, so I don't know how much interest it can bring to anybody. But at that time, small company, right? Very
Yeah.
successful, but small company, Meranger. And we didn't see any Schneider. Schneider was sort of remote
Mm.
shareholder. And that was the beginning of internationalization of the company and the beginning of digitization of everything we're doing.
Mm.
But digitization remained very small for the following 20 years. But it's one of the
Yeah.
reasons why I had joined the company. So anyway, let's if we fast forward through those years, enter for 2 years into the R&D and marketing of the company, developing a line of product. And that was in that joint venture with a German company to compete with
Mm-hmm.
our biggest competitor in France, which was named Télémécanique. Now, 2 years
Yeah.
after, Schneider, the mother company, the holding company, buys Télémécanique.
Mm-hmm.
So I lose my
Mm.
job, right? I have to stop what I was doing. But I'd learned tons. And it was organizing a product launching, specifying products, and so on, which had never been done before in the company. And that was an accelerated connection to many branches in the company. Though I was a junior in the company, I had access
Mm.
to the CEOs of the company
B-
because that was one of
See,
the
yeah.
incubation of the company. What struck me, by the way, is that the
Yeah.
day the general management of the company decided
Mm.
to stop my job on that small team, that small scrum
Mm.
that we had put together.
Mm.
That was in the month of August, which normally is not very active in France.
No,
Uh,
no.
and I was working rural inheritance as always very early in the morning. So I arrived at my
Mm.
office at around 6:30 or 7. And there was the CEO, the big CEO of the company, which had
Mm.
come to my office to tell me in person, eye to eye, that they were stopping my operation while I was level N minus 12 in the company. That
Wow.
stuck with me, and I've always made sure that as I would
Mm.
go forward, I would pay respect to people, even when I would ask them to step down and to stop what they were doing.
That,
Then during, I
mm.
wanted really to understand better sales, so I became a pure sales guy for 1 year.
Yeah.
That was North Africa, that was
Mm-hmm.
north of Europe, super interesting. You love commerce, I know that, I love it. That
Mm-hmm.
would never stop. I can't prevent or help myself from selling. That's important and to be with customers. And then I really wanted to go outside of France to discover the world. And at that time,
Yeah.
the HR policy was to say you have to spend 10 years in your country of origin before going. So I
Mm.
sort of resigned from Schneider, but at the time I was
Mm.
leaving the company, there was a boss of Italy that I didn't know very well, but who had spotted me, and he fell on me and say, "Do you want to come to work to Italy?" But local contract, right? You go,
Yeah.
take your car, come, local conditions, and
Yeah.
the business. What do I have to do? Well, you start something from scratch. You start. So, cut a long story short, I spent the 5 next years in Italy and
Easily. Yes.
learned the language. Was based in Bergamo, Torino, and developed
Mm.
a business from scratch and pushed it to with a few acquisitions to roughly what would be today 60 billion euro.
Mm.
At a time where, if you remember, Italy of that time, which was 89 to 94, was time of manipulite. The
Yeah.
economy was going down the tube. My
Yes.
salary was in lire italiane, which was not a great investment at the time. But I actually lived, I was in a branch somewhere of Schneider, um,
Yeah.
uh, but I lived 5 years of my life in small companies. And I lived actually
Mm.
2 years of my life inside one of those
Yes.
typical small and medium Italian companies that we had purchased
Yes.
to form this. And that was very educational because coming from a French culture, which is sort of always pretty institutional,
Yes.
where the dependence to the government is pretty well. People
Mm.
look up to
Mm-hmm.
some interaction with the government, being part of that fabric, that super
Mm.
entrepreneurial fabric of
Italy.
very
Yeah.
small companies in Italy,
Mm.
left really a big impression on me.
Mm.
And after 5 years, Schneider, and you were in the 90s, Schneider just bought a large company in the US, QWERTY,
Yeah.
needed
Yeah.
money to pay for it. So I was asked to sell what I had built. So did that process. And at the end of this, I was there again reconsidering my options.
Yeah.
Um, and the group was looking for people to start Schneider in China. Uh,
Mm. Wow.
and I got the job because nobody else wanted the job. That let's be
That's yeah, that's something you said. I remember in an interview you had at École Polytechnique, right? You said, "I took job that nobody wanted to take, and including this job in China." I also come back in a few minutes, if you don't mind, asking you about the job in Africa as well.
Yeah, look, and then that was an incredible story in China because we
Yeah.
were sent in China without having the time to learn any language and to be trained to it.
Hmm.
I was in charge of developing fundamentally the commercial business
Yeah.
in China for China, outside of foreign investors. So that
Hmm.
was a deep dive in that country, that continent,
Yeah.
which was starting its real development. You are in 93 on
Yep.
really accelerating. And it was rough condition of operation, but I really remember every part of it as a learning experience, an opportunity to connect people who were developing at a speed on from a
Hmm.
starting point I'd never seen before. And it happened to be a tremendous success. So today, as
Hmm.
you know, China is the second largest
Yes.
business of Schneider after the US, and we operate very locally in China with local teams. But realizing that was for me the early realization that um, the world would be multipolar, that there was not
Hmm.
one way to deal with the governance of countries, of companies, on the way of doing, and that certainly countries like China, with almost 20% of the world population, or India, would
Hmm.
very fast define their own model and define
Yeah.
their own way of doing. And that for
Hmm.
a company like ours, if we wanted to be relevant, it was urgent to make sure that people in those countries could decide by themselves,
Yeah.
develop by themselves, and operate by themselves at the
Hmm.
speed of the country and in full tune with the culture,
Hmm.
the language, and the ecosystem in the country. But those were
Yeah.
incredible years of very fast learning because we had to do everything, start everything from scratch. We started at 10 when I left, we were 6,000. And
Wow.
today you have 28,000 working for Schneider in
Yeah.
the country.
I think it's a pretty amazing story, all in all, Jean-Pascal. Come back to it in terms of your learning curve as well, in terms of international cultures, cultural awareness as well, and empowerment of local leadership team, which is something we discussed quite a bit over the past 20 years, our partnership between Microsoft and Schneider Electric as well. I like, if you don't mind, to go back to the time you spent in Africa as well, because I think it also influenced your views of Africa and energy needs as well. I don't know if this is why it triggered interest to launch the Access to Energy initiative later on, but this really reminded me of a discussion I had with Dr. Rajiv Shah, president of the Rockefeller Foundation, during a World Economic Forum a couple of years ago. I had him on a podcast very early on. And as you know well, under his leadership, the Rockefeller Foundation co-founded the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, supporting more than 130 projects across 40 countries and averting, again, 147,000 tons of carbon emissions. So anyway, love to understand the way you see the role of Schneider Electric in providing energy access, and why is it so vital for societies across the world, like the African society in particular, to have that easy or easier access to energy.
Look, I will rewind a little bit more in the past. I
Yeah.
back to my origins. Um, when I was speaking with my parents, my mother saw electricity coming to her home when she was 9, and my father when he
Hmm.
was 15. And they were still remembering that time as a time of liberation, the time
Hmm.
where many chores and things could be automated, and where you
Yeah.
didn't have to work like crazy to get water or to get access to a number of things, get access to education, right?
Yeah.
Then I will go to my time in China, where in Beijing there were there was one day a week where we couldn't run our factory because we had to share electricity. I remember the numerous power breakdown in the places where I lived there, where during that time, frankly, you were impaired and you couldn't do anything. You couldn't communicate with the world. You couldn't work. You couldn't. So those two things are very practical elements that convince me that energy, access to energy, is a fundamental human right. When you are already in a very, I would say, luxurious, rich, evolved condition,
Yeah.
you normally speak, when you speak about human rights, you speak about very different things. But the reality is that if you don't have access to energy, you don't have a decent life at all. On
Yeah.
my second learning, as in China, I had my first access to internet, is that if energy is your access to a decent life, digital is your access to inclusion, to learning, and then economic inclusion. And that became, and what struck me also is that if we'd be able to merge those two, then we would offer a usage of energy that would be very optimized. Now, back to my question in my time in China, I also
Yeah.
realized as China was developing very fast on doing what they could to get as much energy as they could, that energy could be also the biggest risk for the planet, for the environment, and for the quality of life of people. Remember the smog
Yep.
in
The
China
cities.
in 2010, just 15 years after that acceleration had started. And while China was much richer, it was choking into pollution. So that conscience that energy is your passport to a decent life, but at the same time, energy is the source of 80% of carbon emission, and carbon emission drives a lot of the pollution and a lot of the climate change, means that we had a deadlock to solve, and there are many ways to skin that cat and to offer solution to that. But my strong opinion is that as the world wants to develop, and only half of the world population has today a decent access to energy, the only way to deal with that paradox, with that contradiction, is to
Yep.
produce energy or to consume energy in a different manner. Now, from China, I went to South Africa, and I was in charge of all sub-Saharan Africa. And then the energy dimension as is up, or the energy challenge is at a complete different scale.
Yeah.
Because in Africa, you've got several hundreds of millions who don't have access at all to energy. And the consequence of that, as I said before, is no decent life. So we saw immediately the urgency to, beyond what we are doing, to equip grids, manufacturing, data centers, buildings, I would say the developed part of the country, to come up with innovative solutions, which would be powered by renewable. You are back in time 20 years, so that was
A long
the
time ago. Yes.
beginning of
But
renewable,
obvious.
and make
Yeah.
them actually 25 years, on make sure that we would start to equip communities or villages with clean, autonomous, decentralized, but also connected solution, so that people could control that in the right conditions of safety. And this is when we launched the first version of access to energy.
To energy.
Well, the
Yeah.
first version of access to energy was very generous. It was, I found a partner at the time, it was Shell for the panels. We did the electronics for connecting that panel to the village, and
Yep.
people would get access to the electricity. And it was a glamorous failure because when you do that and you just give things away, nobody takes care of them. And then
Yes.
over time, and it took us 4 or 5 years to refine the sort of
The
solution
model.
we
Yeah.
brought, or the model, we brought together technology, the product, with that innovation. We launched a big program of training people to the work of electrician, to the maintenance on the operation of those systems. That was a people dimension. And
Yeah.
then we helped the most entrepreneurs of them to start a business so that people would be motivated to maintain those systems. And that turned to be the first operation that we called BIBOP, which was Business
Yeah.
Innovation People at the bottom of pyramid,
Yes.
which then became access to energy. And as I
Hmm.
speak to you, and if I just look back at the past 5 years, which has been a
Yeah.
scaling up, we've brought electricity to 60 million people.
Hmm.
We've trained 1 million kids or 1
Wow.
million people to the trade of being electrician. And we've helped 10,000 of them or more, actually, I think now,
Yeah.
to set up their own company, to operate those grids, to rent
Hmm.
those batteries on those sort of things.
That's amazing, and again, it really makes the point very strong that innovation is not enough by itself, and particularly, I mean, in the way you combine innovation, as you said, Jean-Pascal, between electrification, digitization, and the people, the human capital, the skills needed to build the capacity to make it work, make it sustainable, and make it actually reachable to 60 million people and plus. So wonderful, wonderful example of that
And Jean, I
innovation.
know you're passionate by digital and digitization. This
Yeah.
is how we work together for 20 years,
Oh yeah.
on you for Microsoft, on me for Schneider.
Yeah.
But when we do those solutions, actually, the interesting thing is that they are natively very digitized, because
Right.
that allows you to operate controls in the maximum conditions of safety and at relatively cheap or inexpensive cost point.
Yeah.
I was talking to you about farming in India on the system that
Yes.
we developed. One of the major reasons for accidents in India is if there is a problem at night, the farmer would have to leave its home and try to repair physically things. Uh,
Yeah.
as soon as we digitize all of this, that person can either restart the installation from remote. I'm
Hmm.
speaking about smartphone, right? And I'm speaking about a 4G or 3G
Yes.
sort of
Yeah.
connection, or can intervene in the right place immediately and avoid all problem of safety and exposing himself to the risk of being outside
Mhm.
in the countryside.
No, let me, time is moving very fast, and I still have so many questions for you, Jean Pascal. But I want to come back to one particular moment of your life and career life, because it's a pivotal moment where you made the decision to move with your family to Hong Kong. A significant shift, not only geographically, but also symbolically, at the time when Schneider Electric's executive committee was still largely, I think, centralized in Paris, where most French headquarters company are, by the way. You choose to lead by example and relocate yourself as CEO to Asia. And this was not just a personal move, it marked a major turning point, I think, in the company's leadership model, paving the way for a more distributed and globally embedded executive team. So, what led you to make that move to Hong Kong, the decision? And what did it mean not just for you, but also for your family? Because I think that has probably shaped your family's also values, experience together in an incredible way.
Yeah, that was, I would say, a big challenge and a big opportunity for the family. But I think you have to come back to the reason why we did that,
Hmm.
which is really purely business related. And let me rewind even further
Yeah.
before, which is 2003, where I am landed uh, the keys of the company. And frankly, at
Yeah.
the time, I had no idea I would stay
Yes.
in this position for 20 years. But
Hmm.
we were at the time a very small company.
Hmm.
Useful, or I would say the relevant turnover was 8 billion euro. We are
Hmm.
facing competitors which were 5 times, 10 times bigger.
Hmm.
Most of them 5 times, the largest
Yeah.
10 times bigger. And we were just exiting an unfair decisions of the European Commission forbidding us to merge with a very small other company.
Yeah.
And therefore, we are in a pretty dire situation.
Hmm.
I thought that we needed really to differentiate. And we were the only company at that time to define ourselves as
Mm-hmm.
the energy tech company for efficiency and
Yep.
sustainability. I would say efficiency. That was, if you remember, the beginning of the century was a time where everybody was drilling, burning. It was more energy because China was developing very fast.
Yes.
Those
Yeah.
were pretty good economic times. So it was achieve more, but really certainly use much more of our resources. We were the only company that said, okay, that's good economically for anybody to achieve more while using less.
Yeah.
And we base that on digitization. That was
Mm-hmm.
IoT 8 years before it became a known name.
Yes.
Digitizing buildings, cities,
Yeah.
manufacturing for much more efficiency, on electrifying for decarbonization, which
Mm.
led us to really value proposition of efficiency for our customers. But when you look at this paradox or deadlock of
Mm-hmm.
energy, where we need to offer energy to 3 billion more people as we go into the next 20 years, but at the same
Yep.
time, we need to reduce carbon emission, you have to see that today 85% of the new electrification is taking place in new economies.
Mm.
So when I was looking at Schneider for the way to
Yeah.
really deploy our purpose,
Mm.
our relevance to our customers, and the years in front of me, I saw that most of the market would be in the US because the
Mm.
US is fast to adopt new energy system and
Yep.
was the fastest developer of new technologies like data centers, but more so even in new economies.
Mm.
So I started from a base which was vastly European, which is a
Mm.
great continent. I'm a European, I'm French,
Yeah.
but a place where things were already installed,
Mm.
established, and not moving at the same speed. So I started to internationalize the company from where I was at the time. We didn't speak about my stint in the US, which was
Yep.
also a
Yep.
lot of learning, where I came to learn and love a lot the country also,
Mm-hmm.
everything it offers, on its incredible can-do culture. But I
Mm.
was back in Europe and I started to develop our internationalization from there. So we bought APC for the data center in
Yeah.
2007. And then I was setting up, but we were sort of blocked by one aspect.
Mm.
It was the human constituency of the company. If
Mm.
you want to internationalize, you need people of the place,
Yeah.
people, Americans in America,
Mm.
Indians in India, Middle
Mm.
Eastern in Middle East, Chinese in
Mm.
China, to
Mm.
work for the company as theirs.
Yeah.
They don't want to work for somebody who is located thousands and thousands of kilometers away. And I knew because I'd lived in China, Africa, and America that those
Yeah.
parts of the world don't go by the same rules as Europe, of course. So my obsession,
Mm.
because we needed to develop, because we needed to get bigger, was to create a model through
Mm.
which we would, number one, be distinguished by our customers for a value, which is technology for energy, for efficiency and sustainability, but
Yeah.
also a model that would be innovative, that would allow local teams
Mm.
to decide by themselves at the speed of the local and in complete tune with the local culture. And
Strong local empowerment. Yeah.
strong local empowerment, but
Mm.
as strong as doing their own R&D for their
Mm.
own market,
Yeah.
because in our sector, which is also very physical, right? Electrons needs big electrical cabinets with a lot of
Yep.
electronics and software, but still you have a very physical part there.
Yep.
You need to deliver products to our customers for the day before. They
Mm.
always want it for yesterday on according to their specification.
Yeah.
I don't have to explain you who've been traveling the world that in electricity the world is not unique. You have that electrical adapter
Mm.
multiply that by 1 million, and you've got the
Oh yeah.
diversity of what we do around the world.
Yeah.
So I started to empower
Mm.
the regions.
Mm.
First, the US, which was on is today as our largest market,
Mm.
on all of this, and then pushed that model in other parts of the world. But
Yeah.
at one point, I was really blocked by the fact that most of the decision centers were coming back to Paris.
We're stalled.
So
Yeah.
we're stalled.
Mm.
We are stalled in that
Mm.
trust, in that empowerment that we could give to the region. And frankly, I could put all my energy and my conviction
Mm.
into it. We are not progressing.
Yeah.
So look, we are very small among the very big. We had to try a different avenue.
Mm.
So we created the model which I called multi-hub at that time,
Yeah.
which means
Yeah. Yeah.
that every hub, which is one it's not geopolitical, geotechnical place, would have as much autonomy as they could in terms of development, production, marketing, sales of the and operate as a local company. And to
Mm.
do that, I had to show the example. So in
Yeah.
2011, I moved as many people of my executive committee in all parts of the world, and we started to build very practically those hubs on the ground.
Yes. No, it's an amazing story, and I think still a radical example of global leadership. I think, which I like a lot, actually, Jean-Pascal, because like you, I mean, I've traveled the world 40 years of my life. I've always valued so much local insights, local intelligence, local innovation, local leadership, and I know how hard it is for a global company at scale, at hyperscale, to have this really synchronicity between the center, which tends to be the headquarters of a company, and the periphery, which is where the action is happening with the customer. So, wonderful work you've done. As the time keeps going pretty fast, Jean-Pascal, I want to shift to sustainability. You already mentioned, of course, this was one of the core pillars of your transformation that you did as a CEO, beyond electrification, digitization, sustainability. Because beyond business growth, you clearly became, I think, one of the world's most committed advocates for corporate sustainability. Under your leadership, Schneider Electric was ranked in number one in sustainability worldwide. And that did not happen again by chance. So I love to understand at the time when many still see sustainability as a constraint, what made you treat it as a core engine of business growth? And what are the toughest financial trade offs that you had to make and you keep have to make, probably still today for sure now, as a chairman, to continue to honor your commitment?
Yeah, look, I've never, I think the problem with sustainability is that it's largely politicized today.
Yeah.
There is no reason to politicize sustainability. For us, we've been always very pragmatic and grounded in terms of sustainability, and we bring solutions for sustainability when they bring economic returns.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's not sustainable by definition. So
By
we want
design.
sustainable solutions for sustainability. And the key name here is efficiency. And if you are a good business person, or if you are a good industrialist,
Yep.
nobody would say that efficiency is bad for the business. And when I
Mm.
look at what we've done over the past 20 years, where we've engaged with hundreds of thousands of customers on solutions, we don't speak about sustainability, we really speak about efficiency.
Yep.
This is what sustainability is about when you speak about resources on
Mm.
energy. So we define our purpose as helping our customers to make the most of their energy and resources, and we systematically worked on solutions that would bring back a payback in 3 to 7 years. And most of them are actually
Hmm.
shorter in terms of payback than 3 years. So very good return on investment.
Investment. So
So
at the core, your philosophy is sustainability is about business that makes sense
yeah,
and
yeah,
creating
yeah.
efficiencies.
And that doesn't go against the tide, right?
Yeah.
I tell you, as a kayakist, you never kayak against the stream.
Yeah.
It's a lost fight. You go with that. But if you look, you are. given the keys to the company as a CEO. What's your
mm,
role as a CEO? Number one is to put your company in the best tailwinds.
mm,
Or number two is to limit the risk. You've defined two reasons to align your company with sustainability.
mm,
So at the beginning, it was a sort of a lone journey. Like not
mm.
many companies had seen that if you manage to align your company, what you deliver to your customers, your
Yep.
mission, your purpose with sustainability, then you benefit from much better tailwinds. You reduce the risk of everything in the company, which are frankly two big responsibilities of a CEO. Not many people were seeing that. We
Mm.
saw that earlier. And on the top of it, sustainability from that point of view gave us that alignment on what we do,
Yep.
really aligning our purpose, mission, technologies on this, but also on the way we do. And I've always
Yes.
thought that a company is all about people, and you want a board of your company people who have a clear definition of what they are here for, but also how you do business. And
Yes.
we embarked early enough on that group of company of the Global Compact that would work along the same values on the same, and that has been very helpful there again to get the right people on board of Schneider.
So you are actually, I think, still today, right, Jean-Pascal, a board member of the UN Global Compacts, right? And
I'm
right,
not
you still
anymore. I'm not.
not anymore,
I've done two
but
terms, 6 years.
okay, but you can probably talk about it still, right? Given the two terms you did. As a reminder for listeners, the UN Global Compact is a voluntary United Nations initiative that mobilizes businesses and organizations worldwide to adopt sustainable and socially responsible policies. Its mission is to accelerate and scale the global collective impact of business by upholding the 10 principles and delivering the Sustainable Development Goals, the famous SDGs. So, given the current geopolitics of the world, Jean Pascal, with the US exiting the Paris Agreement and the EU postponing and reshaping CSRD, what is the true impact of bodies like UN Global Compact? And what can you do today as a chairman of Schneider Electric and given again the mission of your company? And what should other companies do in that current context?
Look, the Global Compact is really useful because when you start into a work of defining your company, working on sustainability, and again,
Yeah.
working on sustainability for efficiency, and nobody is against efficiency, you need a common grammar. Take the example of Schneider. Speak
Mhm.
about carbon footprint on energy consumption. We consume only less than 1% of our total footprint.
Hmm.
15% is with our suppliers, 85% is with our customers.
Customers, yeah.
So the only way to progress is to progress together. Before the Global Compact, there was no common objective, there was no common language, there was no common way of looking at things. Because we work together and we work together across countries, everybody progresses. And frankly, I mean, companies who have embarked on that journey have done
Yeah.
much better than the other ones.
Hmm.
And again, there is no ideology at all behind that. It's all about working into a more combined and collective efficiency. I'm going to take some example. If I can cut my energy consumption by 30% at a
Yeah.
time where the price of energy is moving every day or every quarter in an
Hmm.
incredible manner, if I operate on a thin line of energy, I'm going to be much more competitive than my competitor and much
For
more
sure.
predictable than my competitor. If you are net positive on a factory, you don't depend anymore
Hmm.
about to the cost of energy. So that
Energy.
makes
Yeah.
you incredibly more competitive. If I can run my factory
Hmm.
on a very thin line of energy, I can operate in an emerging country and you cannot.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's a strategic advantage that you are building over time in terms of economics, in terms of resilience, and in terms of innovation. Because looking at things and designing to lower
Hmm.
cost, to higher efficiency is always a great advantage for any company. So,
No, yeah,
and you need to do it with your suppliers, you need to do it with your customers, you need to
customers.
do it with the communities. And from that point of view, the Global Compact has been the unique organization
Mm.
helping us to have that common
Common
compass and grammar
and
across companies.
framework. No, thanks a lot for reminding us the importance of such organization, because these days sometimes people tend to to downplay those roles. And I was attending today, actually yesterday, the UN conference on the oceans in Nice,
Yeah.
and you know it's still super important to have all those people across governments, startups as well, large companies coming together to truly move the needle at a time where not everyone is aligned in the world. Now, I'd like to shift to the last few questions, Jean-Pascal, on your leadership. You
Jean-Philippe,
know,
maybe
yeah,
to open, because this is a very important, when
yes,
you speak about energy particularly,
yeah,
we are going through energy transitions, right? The energy of the future will be electrical. All new technologies are based on
mm,
electricity. This is the only way that eliminates combustion, on
yes,
eliminates carbon. On Schneider does one part, which is mostly distributing the electrons from the production to the usage, making
yeah,
it super efficient, making it also with microgrids completely autonomous, and making it fully digitized, right? You finally, after so many years, get your
mm,
energy data and get connected to the process data. I can't do that if companies
mm,
like Tesla, for
mm,
instance, or electric car manufacturers are not transitioning some engines to electric cars, right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
cannot do that if buildings are not moving from gas boilers to heat pumps, which are 4 times more efficient. An electric car is
yes,
4 times more efficient than a fossil fuel car. And
yeah,
on the other side, we cannot deliver clean electrons if you don't have solar panels, windmills, or biofuels
yeah,
enabling to do that thing. So that whole chain of transition, which is creating huge economic opportunities,
mm,
can only exist if we work through the chain.
mm,
So it's not only good for what we are describing before, it's
yeah,
good for innovation and
yes.
changing the way we do things.
Yes. No, it makes tons of sense to me. As you know, I'm convinced, obviously, Jean-Pascal, but there's still many minds to open, many people to convince, I think, across the world that it can be run in a very embedded way into the business, into the economy as well. Now, shifting to leadership, last few final questions. I had the pleasure to work with you over the past 20 years, Jean-Pascal. Really a pleasure, both as a supplier, as a business partner, and also as a customer, actually, of Schneider Electric. And what struck me the most in our relationship is your relentless curiosity, your constant pursuit of excellence. For you, I think good is never good enough, and also your humility. So, how do you develop those unique leadership skills that made of you one of the most successful global CEOs over the past 20 years?
Well, I return the compliment to you, right? Because the development of the company that you had at Microsoft is just extraordinary. On actually going through different phases, on being always riding the front of the innovation wave. I don't know how to define what you say, but I believe that in a company you have to question always the status quo,
Mm.
especially when you live in technology. Things are moving so fast. There is no established position. Um, I really believe that you learn more um, in terms of strategy on looking at the future with your customers on the ground, on the field,
Yeah.
uh, every day, I would say, than in meeting rooms with consultants or on PowerPoints. No offense to PowerPoints. But I think you learn a lot. You see things happening on the field.
Yes.
I'm a sort of a person that really start thinking when I face reality. It's
Mm.
when you are facing a machine or when you are facing the life of
Yes.
people on installation that you come with the best ideas. And of course, you can have big strategic
Mm.
ideas, but
Mm.
you make the difference when you streamline a process, when you simplify something, when you make everyday's life back to what we are describing at the beginning of this interview of people simpler and better.
Yes.
So I think cultivating that on like you traveling a lot, being a lot on the field,
Yeah.
uh, in the middle of our teams, together with our customers make a real difference and force you to permanent humility, because normally customers are normally nice. They
Yeah.
like to come to see them, but they are also very blunt and direct, and you have to encourage them to do that. And they tell you what you do wrong, and that's a permanent good reminder on
Yes.
what you have to work on.
Deep listening and keep raising the bar based on your customer's voice always. You know, one of your leadership trademarks, Jean Pascal, is building diverse, inclusive teams. And you've led by example by living and leading abroad all along your career, as we discussed together. In the current context that you know well, where D&I is being challenged across the globe, coming from the US and traveling, do you stay the course at Schneider Electric? And why do you see it as a recipe, maybe, for success and a superior performance as well?
Look, I just believe in people, right? Coming from where I come, from pretty modest origin, not very reputable schools because we didn't know they were existing. I'm really attached that we give the best chance to anybody in the company wherever they come from. So the key word is meritocracy.
Hmm.
And the other key word is the breadth, the strength, and the depth of the pool
Yeah.
you can go on looking for your talents.
Yeah.
And the other key word is competency and engagement.
Hmm.
So making sure that people start really to make a difference in the company when they've been a long time in the company and they know well the company, because then they can really innovate. They know technology, they know the customers, they
Yeah.
know what they can leverage, and they can really impact at a different level. So if my objective was to make sure that people would be deeply engaged and the multi-hub on empowering people
Hmm.
in their geographies more than any other company. The other point was inclusion, because Schneider was doing just products and we needed to learn digital solution, systems, services, digital twins, software, and so on. For me, inclusion is just making sure that we can invite aboard of Schneider the best people all over the world, wherever they are from. And then after, there is only one rule, which is meritocracy.
Yeah.
The best athlete takes the job, right?
Yeah.
On that without distinction.
Yeah. No, very clear message. Now, my very last two questions, one which I always ask to all my guests, Jean Pascal. What does positive leadership mean to you personally? And if you think 20 years ahead, what kind of leadership do you hope that will define the next generation?
Look, positive leadership is, I, there are multiple ways to define that, but it's being obsessed by finding solutions on solutions which are not creating problems for other parts of the world. And I believe we always underestimate the capacity of us thinking differently, looking at things differently, on bringing answers on solutions which are very different. When I look at the next 20 years, I see two elements that will be really essential. Number one, I believe the world will be very different according to the different parts where you operate. So it's going to be global because
Hmm.
we all live on the same planet and we face the same challenges. But the way to address them will be diverging, will be bifurcating, and you're gonna have organization and people who will have to accommodate and actually build on encourage those differences to go at the local speed and at the local within the local culture. The second point is deal with uncertainty. Many,
Hmm.
many of our systems were built around forecasts and a lot of figures.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't remember the last year that was predictable. I cannot, right?
Hmm.
Between COVID and the geopolitical things which happen, on
Yeah.
different crises, on the prices that change, supply chains, on everything. So we're going to have to be really good
Hmm.
at driving with a strong sense of purpose, long term strategies, on a duty of transformation while at the same time being very tactically agile
Mm.
and able to adapt. And those are probably the two biggest changes I see from where we are coming from in the past 20 years. One thing will accelerate to a new level, it's innovation,
Mm.
and especially AI infusing on data, on digitization, infusing everything we do. But that's an acceleration. The other things are true changes.
Yes. Love it. So, my very last question now. If you could speak directly to a young person listening right now, maybe a future leader living in a rural town, not in Vendée, could be in Africa, could be in China, could be in the US, what would you want them to know, this young person, rural area?
I'll take them, make your choices of life. I've got friends who stayed in my place and they had a wonderful life and they are still my very good friends.
Yeah.
And I still meet them and we have plenty of things to tell each other because all of us have seen different things. But once you've made your choices, don't be afraid to jump out and to go for it. And look, I mean, I know the world can be concerning at times, but I've never been as excited as now. The world is open. There are many innovations happening, much more accessible to anybody. My time, there was no internet. I had to go
Right.
to the library to know the knowledge of the world. Today, it's at your fingertips on a mobile phone. So use it, connect, be curious, go for it, and take the jobs that nobody wants because it's a good recipe for an interesting life.
I love it. So, Jean-Pascal, thank you so much for this powerful, deeply inspiring conversation. Your journey, again, from a small town in Vendée, in France, to the global stage is remarkable testament to the power of purpose-driven leadership. To all of you listening, if this episode gave you food for thought, if it sparked or renewed your sense of what's possible, please take a moment to leave us a 5 stars review. Always enjoy them, but also your positive comments to help other friends to join the Positive Leadership Podcast. And don't keep it to yourself. Again, spread that. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another inspiring guest who is helping to shape a better world through bold human leadership. Until then, keep learning, keep leading, and as always, lead with purpose. Thank you so much. Un grand merci, Jean-Pascal.
Un grand merci à toi, Jean-Philippe.